I says, well, I don't know what to tell you. I says, I just paid you 2 days ago. We gave you $600 2 days ago. And she's all, well, I need more money, and that's all there is to it. You know, she says, either you guys pay me for another month in advance, or you could get out and get your own place. And I says, all right, if that's what you want us to do, that's what I'll do. And so I got on the phone and called up my grandfather. And I asked him, because he had some properties that were vacant. He had a house on the south side of town that was vacant that he needed to get rented out. And I says, hey, Grandpa, I says, how much would you rent me that house for that's on the south side? And he says, well, I'll rent it to you $350. And I says, all right. And so me and my grandfather, we made a deal that night, you know, that I would start renting out that house. And so, you know, I got my grandfather's truck. We started loading it up that very night. It was crazy because this was like, when my mom told me about the money, it's like 5. Well, like 6 o'clock, you know, we were moving stuff to that other house. Like right away that night, I didn't even wait. And my mom's like, where are you going? And I says, well, you told us to get out, so I'm gone, you know. I'm getting my own place. I'm tired of this, you know. I need to have my own place. I need to learn responsibilities. And, you know, you have a gambling addiction and, you know, it needs to be broken. And I'm moving out, you know, so we could have our own space, have our own room. Because at this time, my Uncle Daniel was staying at her house. I was staying at her house. My girlfriend was staying at her house. My mom's friend, my mom, and Cal, we're all staying at my mom's house. And it's only a 3-bedroom house and 1 bath, so we really felt like we needed our own place. So we moved over to the south side of town and moved into our own house and start learning responsibility, you know. And back then, you could take $100 to the grocery store and get like a basket and a half worth of food. You know, you could really get a lot for your money. That was back around 2002 or something like that. But nowadays, you take $100 to the grocery store and you might get a couple small packages of meat and a couple vegetables. That's it. You know, you can't get no basket full of food like you could back then. And so we're living on our own. We're paying bills. And, you know, we're really liking life at this point, you know, because, you know, the house wasn't the nicest house ever. And it was a small little house, but it was our house, you know, and we were proud of it. We had our own place. We could call the shots. We could do what we wanted to do. And we didn't have nobody telling us, you know, you need to do this, you need to do that, you know. We could do our own thing. And so we're really liking life at this point. And I think at this time, you know, we were both had our jobs. We were both making money. But even at the time, we still qualified for assistance from the government. So I think we went and got food stamps. My girlfriend did, and I did. And so that helped us out a lot, you know. We were still pretty young. I think I was like 19 at the time, and she was a year younger. She's 18. And so after we moved into this house, I think I had to be on probation for about another 2 months, and I was coming off probation. And I come off probation, and my girlfriend kept telling me, well, you should really celebrate, because she still smoked weed every now and then, and her brother liked to smoke weed, so they smoked together, and her brother would come over once in a while. And she said, well, you know, you should celebrate and you should smoke some weed. And I was just thinking, I don't really want to do that, because I've been off weed so long and I've had such a bad run-in with weed. I didn't want to really smoke any more weed. You know, I just wanted to just push that out of my life pretty much. And so I didn't really want to smoke weed while they kept, you know, talking to me about this and that, this and that. So one day I says, all right, you know, whatever. You know, so after I was off probation, you know, I said, okay, I'll smoke a joint with you guys. Well, I smoked a joint with them, and I was so high, I didn't even like the feeling. And I was like, this sucks, I don't like this or whatever. And they were just laughing and everything. And I didn't really like smoking weed, especially after that first time. But then I started easing back into it. And I wasn't really selling it, but I was just smoking it, you know, here and there. And, you know, I didn't want to get into it like I once was before, because I've been in all that trouble before. And so I'd just smoke a little bit here and there. Well, as time went on, I said, well, maybe I'll start selling a little bit, because there's some guys I work with that, I can make some money off of. And so I started buying a little bit of weed here and there and selling it, some of my co-workers and stuff like that. And a few more months goes by, and me and my girlfriend's relationship started to get a little bit rocky. But we were young, and we didn't really understand, and stuff like that. So I'm not putting any blame on her, and I'm not putting blame on me. Even though we both done stuff that wasn't really right, And after this, I got a phone call one day from my grandfather's girlfriend. She says, "You need to come over here. You need to come over here." And I'm like thinking, what's going on? So I got in my car and went over to my grandfather's girlfriend's house, because he's been living with this lady named Lori for, I don't know, 20 years or longer. Long time. He's been with her for a long time. But they were still, like boyfriend and girlfriend. And my grandfather was like 70 years old at the time, and she was like maybe late 40s or maybe 50, so there was like a big 12, 13 year difference, 22 year difference. There was a big difference, in their age. And so I went over to his house, and they take me to the back room, and she's crying and everything like that. And my brother's there, and my aunt's there, and and we walk in the room, and my grandfather is, he's laying on the bed, and he's dead. There's no pulse or no nothing. And his trache's laying on the floor. That piece of plastic is laying on the floor. And we were just all shocked, like, oh man, and it was a really hard point in my life, because my grandfather just passed away, and he's always been, someone I've always looked up to, someone I've always respected with everything. So, we thought about it, and, she was saying that he took it out to clean it, because he would clean it every day. Well, I guess he was trying to put it back in and couldn't get it back in, and that cancer moved over and blocked off his airway, and, that was it, He couldn't get it back in. It blocked off his airway, and he suffocated to death. And so we ended up having a funeral for him and everything like this. Well, during the funeral time, my Uncle Talleray is still in prison. He's up in Rollins at prison. And they told him that he could come and attend the funeral, but he would be locked up in handcuffs and shackles because he's still a prisoner. And he thought about it, and he decided that he didn't want to come to the funeral being locked up in handcuffs and shackles, That was his father that he just lost. And he decided not to come because he didn't want his family members seeing him locked up in handcuffs and shackles. He didn't like that at all. And so he didn't attend the funeral. So it was a really hard time in our life, because my grandfather was always there to help us, support us, and every one of us loved him, looked up to him so much. And so we had his funeral and everything like that. So after the funeral, I thought things were going to remain normal. Well, my grandfather, he has 3 daughters, like I said, Darlene, Joanne, and Christina, which is my mom, and 4 sons, Ronnie, Gary, Danny, and Talleray. Ronnie was the youngest, and he already passed away during this time. And we always thought, well, my mother was always there taking care of my grandfather all the time, especially during his sickness. During his sickness, my mother was there all the time. Like my grandfather even come over, for a short period of time and stayed with my mother, so my mother could just watch over him, take care of him and everything. My mother was always there for him, 100%. And that's one thing about my mother. My mother always loves people. She always has a kind heart. And she'd do whatever it takes to feed you, to give you whatever she can. Even though she's struggling with money or whatever, if you come over to visit us, she would do whatever she could to feed you or whatever, and just be a real loving person to everybody she could. Her only downfall is she had a gambling addiction. That was her only downfall. But everything else, she's a loving person. She loves everybody. And so she was always taking care of my grandfather. And my Aunt Darlene, she lived in Las Vegas at the time with her husband. And my Aunt Joanne would come over to help take care of my grandfather also. So my mother Christina and my Aunt Joanne would take turns taking care of my grandfather. My aunt would come over, bring him food, and do what she can do. And my Aunt Joanne is still working a job at the time. And but my mom was pulling more weight in this. But I'm not trying to say who was doing more or anything like that. It's not about that. And so during this whole time, I know that my grandfather was thinking about that. You know, he's getting up in age, and he's going to face death soon. And he needed to decide on who's going to get what, who's going to, you know, be the sole person over his property, over his assets. Who's going to be the sole owner, so that they would know how to manage them or distribute them or whatever, you know. So I think he ended up picking my Aunt Joanne. And not for the reason that he felt that she loved him more or nothing like that. He looked at it more of the aspect of her house is in order. She knows how to manage her bills properly. You know, and I know he wanted to really give something to my mother. But he knew like her financial situation, and she wasn't really that good at managing money. So, you know, Joanne really was the best option at that time. And so he ended up picking her. And so we're going to fast forward later on. So right after my grandfather ended up passing away, you know, like I say, the whole family dealt with this, and we're all troubled by it. You know, it's like a total shock to every one of us. And so after his funeral, I go back, and I'm still living in that house. And at the time, I think my grandfather owned 2 houses on the west side, and 1 house on the south side and 1 house on the west side. So 4 houses total is what he owned. And so I'm just like, you know, I'm just going back to work and doing the normal everyday stuff. And so my Aunt Joanne is the sole person over all of his assets and property and stuff like that. And so one day I noticed, my girlfriend told me, she says, "Hey, we don't have no water out the house. The water's shut off." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she's all, "And the heat doesn't work either." She says, "Did you pay the bill?" And I said, "Yeah, I paid the bill." And so I come home, and yeah, sure enough, you know, the water wasn't working, the heat wasn't working. And so I called up the light company, the water company, and they says, well, the manager over this property, the owner, had the lights and the water shut off. And I was like, how is that possible? You know, we need lights and water. So I called up my mom, and I told her, well, they shut off the lights and the water on us. You know any of this is what's going on, or do you have a clue? And she told me, she says, well, your Aunt Joanne called the company and had everything shut off. She wanted to get you out of that property so she could work on it, fix it up, and sell it, get rid of that property. And I was like, all right. But at the time, I was really frustrated. I was mad, you know. I was really mad about all this. Because, you know, I'm thinking, well, what is this, you know? You know, I could pay bills, you know, and she just shuts it off on me just for the whole purpose to push me out so she could. I understand the point that she wanted to get the property fixed up so she could sell it, but come on, can't she at least call me up and tell me her plans of what she wants to do instead of just doing it? But you know, at the time I was still a little bit rebellious. Even though I was trying to change my life a little bit, I was still a little bit rebellious and stuff like that. And I just, you know, I thought that there could have been a better way that she could have reached out to me and told me about things. So, you know, we had to move out. We had to move out of the house. And we didn't really have nowhere to go. So we ended up moving back in with my mother. So we moved back in with my mother, and because there's nowhere else to go. So we moved back in with my mother at this time, and staying there at my mother's house and everything like this. Well, during this whole time of my life, I never knew my dad. When I was, I think 10 years old, my mother had to go to court to get child support established and to get DNA and all that stuff established. And my dad lived in Louisiana at the time. And, you know, I was all excited, you know. My mom says, well, we got to go to court. Well, I didn't understand it at that early of an age. I thought I was actually going to go to court and meet my dad face to face. That's what I thought was going to happen. But that's not what it was, you know. It was just to get DNA results established and get child support flowing and this and that. And my mom asked me at the time, she says, well, would you like to take your father's last name? My name was Justin Padilla at the time, growing up. And I says, well, yeah, you know, I'd like to have my dad's last name. And so I ended up taking my dad's last name also. So my last name became hyphenated when I was 10 years old. It was Justin Padilla-McCool. And I thought everything was going to change when I was 10 years old. I thought I was going to get to meet him. I thought I was going to get to know him. I thought we're going to spend time together, stuff like that. But that is clearly not the case. Like, I didn't even receive a letter for my birthday, for nothing, no communication. Right after the DNA and everything was established, my mom called up and talked to his wife at the time. And they were trying to set up, you know, so I could go down there for the summer and, you know, spend time with them and stuff like that. And I think first they agreed to it. But then then they called and talked to each other later, and she says something like, well, I don't think we have enough room for your son, and our son's real young. And so that just all got thrown out the picture. And I'm not trying to make blame on maybe that's why I went through a rebellious life at a young age, but, you know, it could have been, it could have been, you know, because my only father figure was my grandfather. And so that's what happened in my early age. So fast forward on down to when we moved back with my mother after my grandfather passed away and after we got kicked out of that property. You know, I was still thinking about my dad a lot, you know, and I didn't even know. I wanted to meet him. I wanted to know who he was. But, you know, he was so far away and I didn't have a lot of money and it felt like I wasn't really invited. You know, I had a lot of stuff going. So I kind of had some resentment from my dad for the fact that he didn't accept me. I didn't want to hurt him or nothing like that. That wasn't my plans. But even my Uncle Daniel would tell me at times, he's all, you're a good kid, you have a lot of potential, and you know, you're great, and I love you. And he knew I was struggling, you know, with the hurt from my dad, you know, not being in my life. And he says, when you see him, you punch him in his face, and you know, but I think he was just joking around. He wasn't really telling me to punch him in his face or nothing like that. He was just saying, you know, you're a good kid, you have a lot of potential, and I wish your dad would recognize this and know this. And so at the time we're staying with my mom's house, you know, I really got interested, and I wanted to, you know, try to contact my dad because I wanted to talk to him and ask him these questions that were on my mind. And so I asked my mom, do you have his phone number? And she says, yeah, I have his phone number. I have it written down. And back then, everybody kept like a little book with all their phone numbers written down in. And that was just, you know, but nowadays they all got it in their cell phone. And so she gave me his number. And I says, well, I'm going to call him. So I reached out to him one day and I called him. And I says, is this John McCool? And he says, yeah, this is John McCool. And I says, this is your son. And there was just a dead silence. And next thing you know, a woman grabbed the phone from him and says, John doesn't live here no more. And I says, what? I says, I was just talking to someone who said it's John McCool. And I said, what do you mean he doesn't live here anymore? Yeah, you got the wrong number. He doesn't live here anymore. And I hung up. And I was just like, I knew that was my dad. But I was thinking, what is this going on where this woman's telling me he doesn't live there anymore? And so My girlfriend was mad too, so I says, well, maybe you call. So she called. My girlfriend called and talked to that lady. And that lady was his wife, you know, but she was telling us that he didn't live there. And so she called and she was trying to, you know, tell my girlfriend the same lies, trying to say, yeah, he doesn't live here anymore. Like, we split up, stuff like that, da da da. Well, the more and more my girlfriend started talking to her, she ended up spilling her guts. She told my girlfriend, well, he does live here, but he just really doesn't want to talk to Justin and just really doesn't want anything to do with him, kind of deal. And I felt like, this is jacked up, because I'm trying to reach out to him, trying to understand who he is, trying to meet him. He hasn't been there for any part of my life, and I'm 19, coming up on 20 right now, and I'm just really trying to understand who he is. You know, I'm trying to understand him, have a relationship. And I'm getting this like cold shoulder kind of deal. So I'm like, man, whatever, you know. So I don't even try contacting him no more.